guys. Let me see. All right, just gonna put on my headphones. Make sure I can see your comments. Okay. Hi, Allie. Hi, Steph. Majori, Angelica. Let me just plug in my headphones. So I realized that some of you guys were waiting a little bit earlier, and I think you guys were waiting for me from like 10:30, and I realized the reason being is because the time for the YouTube was set to an hour earlier, but actually we are starting at 11:30, and I am 1 minute early. I just wanted to come and hang out. Hi, Carla. So today I wanted to do something a little bit just earlier today, just to test it out to see if more people can, join in. And I will try to set a live session maybe for the next one during the weekend. I just need to ask Tim and just make sure that I can have a couple of hours of quiet in the house. Daylight savings, maybe. Okay, so it is 11:30, and because we have a lot to do today, I am going to actually begin. Let me make sure my camera is on. Okay, great. Actually, I'll wait like 1 or 2 more minutes just to have people come in and join us if they are. But why don't you guys share where you guys are tuning in from? Okay, Judy. Yeah, definitely. I will try to hop on live maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday. Weekends just get a little bit crazy for me. So, but yeah, we can definitely do one of them. If not, you guys can always post your questions on the group chat on the forum. And I actually printed out a bunch of questions, everything that you guys asked on the forums to make sure that I cover the things that you guys were asking for. So we have a lot to cover today. So I'm really excited that you guys are here joining in. If not, the replay links are always going to be available to you guys through the course. There's a section called live session links. And so if you look at that under the student forum, you can always watch the replay. Make sure you submit your questions before I do this so that I make sure you guys don't miss out on anything. Awesome. Okay. So I will begin. It's 11:32, and the format for this live session is basically to give you guys some additional support for the course. And I know that there are some things that I might have missed while filming the course, as well as if there's any questions that come up while you guys are practicing or doing your homework. This whole session is just to provide you guys some additional feedback, as well as look at some questions that people were asking, but we can do it together as a group. So we are going to I'm going to first point out some things from the homework. First of all, you guys are amazing. The homework looks really great. I don't have time to like answer each one, but I do look at the homework you guys submitted. I like save some of them, and I'm just so proud of you guys for, I know like last module homework was like over 10 pages or something, and you guys really did such a great job. And I hope you guys liked the whole exercise where I had you guys do each of the descending, ascending letters and then try out your different variations, because ultimately you know, as I'm giving you guys some examples, I also want you guys to have confidence and have the freedom to play with these letters on your own. And so I was really impressed by some of the letters that I've seen in your homeworks. And I hope that as you guys are also scrolling through and encouraging each other on the student forum, that it would also serve as an additional like idea or inspiration for you to try the letter variation that your fellow classmates have submitted. So it's just really fun to see you guys interacting and encouraging each other, and just being really engaging with the course. It really makes the whole experience for the class worth it. So let me switch my camera and we'll get started. So I'm gonna just switch over to okay. All right, let me just set this up right here. It's a little yellow. Okay, I think I'm gonna leave it right here. Okay. So here are some of the homeworks that you guys have submitted. And again, I wanted to just showcase just a couple of homeworks that I thought was amazing that you guys were doing. Um, so definitely continue to work on this. I know like I didn't give you guys a lot of space for this homework exercise, but it's just a starter. So if you guys want to continue to look at these letters and using a pencil, you don't have to use ink right away. Actually, I do encourage with this whole letter exploration part that you would use a pencil, because a pencil allows you to just experiment, make tweaks, and doesn't make things really concrete yet, especially because you're just figuring out what sort of variations that you can come up with. And so I just wanted to show you guys some of these amazing work that your classmates have submitted. So continue to do that. This one, I know a lot of you guys were asking about the Q, so I just wanted to show you guys. Q doesn't really have that much of a variation. Even for me, I don't really have too much in my bank for the letter Q, but it was really interesting seeing what you guys have come up with. So even between these Qs, this loop here is a lot bigger than this smaller loop. You can play around with that. You can actually just stop it right after you make that curve and tuck it in inside of that loop. Or here, I loved how Alyssa added a cusp to this Q, and then added that end flourish here. So okay, so that was. Let me just show some other examples. Let me see. For this part with the homework with the matcha and the gutsy, I want to encourage you guys to, the reason why I chose these words is because there was like a good mixture of ascending stem loops as well as descending stem loops. And actually just, okay. But one thing I want you guys to work on continually as you do this is, as you keep practicing the different flourishes, why don't you guys, in the beginning, I feel like even when I was flourishing, my flourishes ended up being really tight, or I was really afraid to go beyond these ascending line as well as descending line space here. But I do want to encourage you guys to try to kind of elongate your flourishes. So if I were to take this word here, matcha. So if the X height is one space here, and this is the first ascender line, second ascender line, I do want you guys to see what it looks like, compare what it looks like if you were to elongate your flourishes. Let me see if I can grab this. Again, because flourishing is an extension of your letter forms, there is a sense of kind of like the graceful, elegant look when your flourishes are bigger than the size of your letters. So let's see. So for this one, and it's okay to start like this, smaller, because I know that for many of you, this is the first time you are doing flourishing. And so, but I do want to encourage you guys, as you keep practicing, as you're doing these different words and practices, just compare what would it look like to have a word with flourishes that are tight versus words that are more elongated. And obviously, if you're working on a longer piece, then the flourishes can't go too much outside of that guidelines. But if you're, let's say you're doing place cards and you're only working on a name, first and last name, then you have a lot of room to play with. And I find that it's really pretty if you utilize that space around the word. And so here, I'm just going to do this over with this, maybe darker. Okay. So let's say this H is a little bit longer. You just make sure you stay on the slant here for the H. And instead of curling this in right away, you can actually either curl it bigger this way or even bringing it out. So one option can be like this. And then another option can be bringing out the other way. Let me do this part with the pencil. If you wanted to come back out this way. Even with the A here, she decided to put a flourish underneath the baseline for the A, which is a really good space because there is no other competing descending stem loops. So if you wanted to make it bigger and do the figure 8, we can make that lower. And then for the M, this one is good. And then the T, even with this crossbar, because you have some space here as well, and don't be afraid to even intersect these lines. Someone was asking, is it okay for me to intersect these lines? You can actually, as long, because it's a hairline to hairline, it's okay. As long as it doesn't look too crowded. So you can actually utilize this space and make it a little bit longer to the left because there's nothing on top of this M. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a couple more things that I've noticed in your homework, and then I'm going to switch over to all the questions that I've gotten from the student forum, like this module 2 questions, and then I'll open it up to some live Q&A. So that's just kind of like the format for the next hour. Let me see. Even with this, let's move down here. Gutsy. Take off this. Okay. I'll move it over here. Okay, so with this gutsy, I'm actually going to go through more of entry stroke flourish variations, and I'm going to be working on a handout sheet for you guys. I don't have it ready for you right now, but after seeing that many of you guys were asking about entry flourishes, I realized that that is something that I didn't cover in that module. And so I am planning on providing you guys a resource page of all the entry flourishes that you can use. It won't be like every single one that I know of, because every time I work on pieces, sometimes I'll discover a new entry flourish. And so, but I did start brainstorming some examples that I want to show you guys today. And then I'll put it all together in like a page in a PDF and send it to you guys hopefully soon. If not, definitely every time I do make updates for this course, I will have you guys get access to that for free. So that's just something that you guys can just be assured of. So for this G flourish, again, with this entry flourish here, you can actually do a horizontal loop to enter into that G, like that, just to add some lines there, or Let me see. You can go up this way and do a more clockwise curved stroke into the G. Because there is a lot of space up here, I'm actually going to just stick with the horizontal entry flourish, similar to the uppercase letters that you guys are probably on right now. Can do a more horizontal flourish here. You can add a shade on this side. Okay, this is good. I like the way that she uses flourish because it covers the space between the G and the Y, because all of these inside middle letters don't have any descending stem loops. The Y, this is good too. The only thing about the flourishes is that you notice that this one, she looped around and then she did another loop on the other side. I would encourage you guys to do a little bit of a variation when you're doing flourishes so that you're not doing the same flourish for the word. And I do like that she did this inner loop for this Y. But I'm just thinking that because this and this, it looks like mirror, like it's the same. Another option can be, let me see, if we do keep the inner loop here and we can bring it around. Or if you keep the inner loop and then just bring it out. Okay, so those are two different options. Okay, so let me bring it up here. So one option can be, again, make sure keeping that oval shape, we're going to keep that inner loop and you can just bring it out this way on the bottom. Or you can do the inner loop and then maybe use a different color. Keep that inner loop and then we're going to bring it out towards the right. Make sure you finish it off with a nice curve. And then the T crossbar, you notice there's a lot of space up here. And so this is good. I would actually even elongate this crossbar a little more just because, there is nothing up here. So if you were to do, let me see, you can start from here. And come in like that. Or, let me grab my other pen. You can start the curve from the left side. Okay, start from the curve from the left side, and then you can just add an oval on top. Okay, so it's just when you guys are working on these words, really focus on the spacing around it. And especially if you're just doing one word and working on a place card, things like that, I do want to challenge you guys to make your flourishes a little bit bigger and then compare it to your other sketches, and then see how it makes you feel the difference between flourishes that are a little bit more tighter versus flourishes that are a little bit more elongated and allows it to breathe. So those are some things I wanted to point out, as well as, okay, let me see. Okay, I'm going to just go into, I did want to point out this. So I noticed that for some of the letters, okay. So let's take a look at this word lemons. Okay. I want to, when you guys are working on these sketches, these are really nice, big flourishes and ovals, and it's really great. But the thing that I do want to have you guys look for is that when you're doing some of these letters, you don't have to flourish, especially when you flourish off of letters that don't contain a ascending or descending stem loop. It can become a little, it can affect the legibility of the letter if you're flourishing off of those letters. So for example, for this E, because the E naturally goes upward, so here is the E, the ending stroke goes up. And this upstroke is really important for us to know that that letter is an E. And so I personally don't recommend flourishing off of an E, because once you start flourishing this bottom part, instead of the natural course going up, we're actually, because this was going down, you see how this letter right here, it just looks like a loop. It doesn't look like the letter E. And so that's something that I want you guys to watch out for, is that when you're flourishing off letters like K, for example, this one, this is totally fine because it doesn't affect the legibility of this letter, because naturally this ending stroke is going down. This is going down here. So then even if we did the flourish off of that K, this whole, generally speaking, this letter right here looks like a K. But the problem comes when we start flourishing off of all of these letters that don't contain, any ascending or descending stem loops. And the temptation can be to add a flourish, but then it can affect the legibility. So I hope that makes sense. So I would have just connected it directly to the M, keep the E, but if you wanted to do something on the bottom, let me see. We can even do off of the L, or let me see, maybe, or we can bring this S down. Do you remember when instead of this S going up, if we were to just keep that E connecting to the M, we can bring maybe this S down here, add a loop, and then add that flourish to the left, so that it covers that space on the bottom. And this is only if you wanted to. You don't have to always have a flourish on the bottom and on top, but just as an example, if you wanted to add a flourish to cover all of this white space around this word, I would have used a different flourish off of the S instead of flourishing off of the E. And then now that we move that flourish down below the baseline, we now have this space. So because we don't have this flourish here, but if you notice, we do have this ascending stem loop off the L. And this is a great place to add a flourish above the waistline. And so then I would have then played around with this L and possibly bring that up. And then do one of these, and you can bring it back down. Okay, so that's just another tip for you guys to look for when you guys are working on words, not to make sure legibility is first priority, and then adding on flourishes as kind of like a decorative element. So that's something I wanted to point out as well. Okay, we're gonna move on to all the questions, because I did, oops. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just reboot this. Okay, the camera is going a little bit crazy. Okay. Just go back to screen share. Okay, great. Yes, Judy, this is all going to be recorded, and then I'll share the replay link for you guys. Okay, so we're going to go into beginning flourishes, entry flourishes for lowercase letters. So I'm going to do these in pencil. And then there's some examples that you guys were asking for me to demonstrate with ink as well. So let's start with this. Okay, so I'm using a copper plate guide sheet, and this one is from John Neal. It's called Copper Plate Graph Pad, Engrosser's Graph Pad, and it has these little grid marks as well as a slant line. So I really like using these for sketching as well as just for practicing. The paper, it's great. It doesn't bleed, and you can use for inks as well. Okay, so hi Tammy. Okay, so we're going to begin with beginning flourishes. And I got a question from Debbie asking about how to flourish the beginning of letters like I, M, and N, and things like that. And then I got a bunch of questions about how to flourish entering into the letter V, just a bunch of questions about entry flourishes. So I'm just going to go through, I just took a couple of minutes like this morning just to map out some examples for entry flourishes. So we're just going to go through each of them together. Okay, so the first one, I'm just going to make sure you guys can see this. Okay, so the first entry stroke would be just like we did for Gutsy in the homework example, would be the horizontal oval stroke. Okay, so you can just start with a nice big horizontal oval and then go right into the letter like I. She was asking about I. Okay, so this one would be starting from here. We're going to go counterclockwise to the left, and we're going to do a horizontal flourish. Okay, then another example. Let's do the second one. Okay. Is you start below the baseline and you're going to actually make your movements clockwise up. Okay, so if this was your baseline here, we can go up from this way and then making sure your eye is on slant. Okay, so there's your eye. Okay, so this one, notice that it can go below the baseline for this entry stroke. Here's the baseline for this letter, and this one begins below the baseline. Okay, so again, I'm going to make a resource page for this for you guys so you can print it out in a PDF and have it all in one sheet as a reference. Okay, then you can make this curve. You can actually curve it, start the curve lower like this, or you can just start the curve just like right around here. And so again, this is just a skeleton I wanted to show you. And then from here, you can also make a little bit of tweaks. Okay, so you can start from up here, or you can start here and just kind of go a little bit of an entry stroke, or you can start down here much lower and then enter it into the stroke like that. Okay, number 3, different way to do entry stroke, let's say for letters like N. So this is, actually, let me go back up here. So this one is a clockwise curved line into the letter I that starts below the baseline. But you can also start it entry stroke above the baseline. Okay, so if this is your baseline here, I'll just draw my baseline. And let's say we're doing the letter N. Okay, you can start from here. We're just going to make sure you have a nice curve. Then you can do your N, compound curve. Okay, so you can start this above your baseline. Okay, let's look at another example. Let's look at number 3. Let's say we do have a letter M. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write the letter M first. And then from here, I'm going to add a flourish going counterclockwise and adding a loop. So from here, this point, I'm just going to nicely add a loop going out to the left. And this is when you have a lot of space to the left of that letter, and the shade is going to come here. But again, you don't have to add a shade to your flourishes. You can actually keep it all hairline if you want to have your flourishes look really delicate and light and airy. But if you want to add a little bit of shade, you can add a shade up here. Okay. So this one was going this way, starting from up here. Okay, so remember that this is a skeleton, but let's say you don't want to end it here. You can actually just continue that oval shape and come back down here, down below. So if I were to do, let's say, the letter V, move it over a little bit. Okay, so if I'm doing the letter V, I'm going to write my V first. And then from here, I'm going to then take my pen and then I'm going to do a slight point here and come back out. And then add in 2 loops. Okay, if you don't want to even cross this first loop, so this one it would be just 1 loop, this one would be 2 loops. But let's say you don't even want to intersect those lines and you just want to keep it open. And that's totally fine. So let me just show you that example. Okay, so this would be number 4. Okay, we're going to look at the letter V again. So let's say you want to keep that open. So from here, you can still go counterclockwise, but keep that loop open. Okay, going this way. So you notice that this is similar to this entry stroke, except the way that your motion moving is different. So this one you're going clockwise, number 2, and number 4 you're going counterclockwise. And that just helps with if you want to add a shade, because here you're going all upstroke and there's no shade for this entry stroke. But for this one, if you wanted to, you can definitely add a shade coming down because it is going counterclockwise. Okay, so is this helpful for you guys? Okay. Let me see. Number 5. I think there's just one more I want to share. Just a really simple one. But let's say you have a letter like P. This is your basic letter form. So your entrance stroke, exit stroke, and then you have your full pressure stroke. Okay, there's your P. Okay, so if you wanted to do just a slight bigger stroke so that this, because let's say you're doing like trying to flourish like party, and all of your letters, let me just write this down so you guys can see. If I'm trying to flourish the letter party, just doing this on the fly, so let me see. Like you're making invitations for like a birthday party or something. Okay, so let's say I'm just gonna do a basic flourish. Okay, there's party. But notice, let's say I'm gonna do flourishing off of the P. Just gonna do this like an open loop. And then let's say this top part, you can just curve it. Okay. Okay. Actually, this one might not be the best example, but if I wanted to, let's say maybe this would have been better if, let's say, I'm just going to make up a word because this is not a good example because the last letter is a descending step loop, but I was going to make an example with if I had a letter that ended with just like okay, let's say, I'm just making up a word now, but for the sake of my demonstration, let's say this is a word and just shade. Okay, so notice that I'm adding this ending stroke and I'm going to go beneath the baseline and I'm opening up this loop because regular exit stroke would be really tight up here, would be up here. Okay, but with flourishing, with ending strokes, you can actually just do a very simple flourish, just opening up that loop on the bottom and going below the baseline. But notice that the entry stroke just looks really tight compared to this A. Okay, so what you can do in this situation is, yes, you can use this part up here with the horizontal oval stroke, but another thing you can just do would be just to elongate the entrance stroke. So instead of starting it right up here, you can just start from here and then go up and have a slight curve in the beginning, okay? So I hope that just visually kind of helps you guys just to have a couple of examples. Let me see. Oh, there is one more I want to share. When you're writing, Carla asks, you're writing on pencil, is your paper? Oh, actually, yes. Right now, my paper is at 90 degrees. Just because I'm so used to writing at this angle for my pen with ink that even with a pencil, right now, yeah, I am actually writing with at 90 degrees. Okay, so just one more I did want to share because I was working on something and then I kind of realized this would be a really nice entry stroke as well. So number 6 would be, let's say you have a letter like the letter O. Okay, so, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it down here. Okay. Okay, let's say you're beginning with the letter O. Okay, so from here, I would write the letter O first. And then if you have a lot of space, let's say all the flourishes are on the bottom here, on the bottom left, the bottom right, and then you have a really big empty white space on the upper left corner of your word, then I think even adding this loop, just going back up and adding a loop can also be a really nice entrance stroke, entry flourish. Okay, so notice that for some of the letters, so you're not going to start from here and then try to go in like this. Usually, I write the letter first, and then I'm adding the flourish after because sometimes after I write a word, then I notice that I can make some tweaks or I can add a flourish here, and so those are just some examples. So let me just zoom out. So these are the ones that we've covered today. Okay. Okay, so we talked about having a horizontal entry stroke. We talked about doing a clockwise curved stroke below the baseline, or you can go above the baseline. I should do the arrow here. You can start from above the baseline. And then for these letters, you actually write the letter first, and then you're going to add a flourish afterwards. And this one would be counterclockwise, adding a loop or extending the second loop down under the baseline. Or you can keep that part open as just a not a closed loop, but just like an open oval shape. We talked about elongating your entry stroke so that it kind of mirrors this ending here. If you have a word that ends with a simple flourish on the end. And then we talked about if we have letters like O, you can actually do a lot of flourish on top of the waistline by adding this loop flourish. Okay, so those are just some of the beginning flourishes that I hope is helpful for you guys when you guys are working with letters so that your word can be a little bit more balanced. Okay, so I'm going to move on to multiple ascending and descender loops. There's a lot of questions about this as well. So let me zoom in. Actually, while I'm zoomed out here, I'm gonna just show you guys a zoomed out version. This is the highest my camera can go. I'm taking off my sock just to show you guys this part, my wrist here. So this is the center of my, what is it, my stomach on the table. This is my stomach, and my paper is at 90 degrees. But no matter where you guys are, I think there was a question about they want to see my hand motion. And so usually when we're doing copper plate, like for adjusting envelopes or place cards, things like that, most of my work for copper plate, I don't have to make such large movements unless I'm doing like a brush marker on like a huge poster, like a signage for an event or something like that. And so when we talk about whole arm movement means like when you have your whole arm off the table and you're just gliding on your side of your hand across the paper. So usually when I'm doing like brush calligraphy, so let me see if I can find a brush marker right now. I should have one. Okay, so let's see. So I think this brush marker works. But if I'm using my brush marker, I'm going to just move my pen up so you can see my wrist and my hand. So notice that my whole arm is not being anchored to the table. Whole arm movement means you're literally just using your whole arm from your shoulders and you're gliding your hand across your paper, and you're just having some level of control by just making sure the paper is just lightly touching the side of your hand. Okay, but majority of the time I don't use whole arm movement for copper plate because look at these letters over here. This is pretty much the biggest I would write for most of my copper plate work. And so because they're a lot smaller X height, I'm using a more combined movement where I'm using a finger movement for the shades, but I am kind of still anchoring my arm on the table with enough of this gliding motion so that my curves are smooth. But let's see. So if I'm using the brush marker here, okay, I'm just gonna focus on my wrist right here. And I took off my sock glove so you guys can see that I'm not doing this of a movement when I'm doing brush, but I'm doing more of a gliding movement across my hand here. Okay, so I'm just gonna do, let's say, a letter like B. So because this is gonna be of a bigger X height, let's say like this. Okay, so you notice that my whole hand was moving there? Okay, so only when I'm doing like bigger X heights, like this X height is like about an inch high, whereas this one is probably like 1/5 of an inch high. And so when I'm working on bigger letters, like when I'm doing like chalk lettering or brush calligraphy or things where my letters have to be a lot bigger, then I will use a lot of whole arm movement where, my whole arm is off the table and I'm literally just gliding on my hand to make sure that I'm getting my curves right. But with what we're doing, most of the stuff that we're going to be doing during the chorus is at a very smaller X height. And so for these letters, I'm using a more combined movement where, let me see if I can grab my pen holder here. Okay, so I'm just trying to show my wrist. Okay, so if I do an example here, just watch my wrist. Okay, I don't even have ink on this pen right now. Okay, but here I'm gonna do, so for the lowercase letter, you barely don't even see any of that move. I'm still using finger here because it's all on the X height. Well, let's say I'm going to be doing this A flourish. Then watch my hand here. I shall move it up so you can see it better. Okay, if I do an A flourish, finger movement, then from here, okay? I don't know if you guys can see that, but basically when I'm doing this longer flourish, I'm using both finger and I'm still using this arm right here. I'm anchoring my forearm muscle to my desk, but a lot of this is moving like this, okay? So that was something that somebody was asking for me to demo. So just wanted to cover that really quickly. Okay, let's move on to multiple ascending and descending loops because there was a lot of questions about that. And I'm going to demonstrate how you guys do the word like happy. Okay, so let me this paper. Okay. Okay, so multiple ascending descender loops can be tricky because you have so many like competing letters that take up above the waistline. So let me just demonstrate, for example, how I would do a word like happy birthday. Okay, so the first thing I do is I usually lay down the basic structure for the word. Okay, so I'm just going to do H. I'm not even going to do the ascending stem loop. And do A. The P, so 2, 4, 6, this is your top. So P. Make sure you stay consistent slant. Okay, and then Y. Makes a stroke. Okay, so here's the word happy. You have 3 letters that go up, that go below the baseline, and then you have 3 letters here, 1, 2, 3, that go above the waistline. Okay, so the first thing I do if I have 2 P's next to each other, it's really not bad to have it the same next to each other like this, but this is just if you guys wanted to add a little bit of a different variation to your letters, this is what we're going to talk about. So I don't want you guys to think that it's wrong to keep it the same. It's totally okay. But if you do have letters like PP next to each other, then I will usually curve this, and then you can intersect that P. Okay, even for this, there's a couple of things you can do here with this top part of this P. You can either curve it. So the first one can be curved if you want it to, or I mean the second P, or let's see, actually, let me see, maybe I want to just add a top loop for this P. In that case, I would probably just leave this straight on, just because it's cleaner instead of having a lot of curves if that P was curved. Okay, so this could be a fun variation because you see how it's like kind of like on the opposite side. You have adding a loop on top. You can feel free to intersect as long as you're not intersecting shade to shade. You can keep this straight as the full pressure stroke, and then you can intersect that with your second P. And then with the H, you still have a lot of room here. So you can even just do this flourish. Okay, we talked about this entry stroke, how you can elongate that. You go below the baseline. Okay, you can with this Y. So usually if I do have like competing ones here, because this stroke here ends like a little bit close to the Y, I would keep this Y narrow. the loop of this wide arrow. Okay, and then this part right here, we're going to do a slight curve. I'm going to keep this narrow. And then you can just add an open loop on the other side. Okay. But again, there's just so many variations to how you can flourish this word too. So I'm just going to go through just a couple of, what is it called? Let me see. Oh, I'm trying to see what's the best way. Okay. So if you have double letters next to each other like this is the way I would just look at the space around it. See if I keep this straight, then you can add a loop to intersect it as well. The reason why I didn't curve it on this top part is because look what happens if I curve this second one. So if I curved it like here, you see how it's like intersecting with that line. And you can bring this loop maybe a little bit lower, like that, to avoid it. So that could be an option too. You just have to really look at the lines that you have and see which one you want to tweak. But for me, if I do this curve, then I would probably make this loop lower. Just so it doesn't compete with that space for the P. I'm just going to go through a different, the double letters also that people were asking about. So let me just run through that really quick because it's already 12:20. Okay, so let me do some examples here. Okay, so OO was the first one I want to show you guys. So you have an O, and this is your basic O. Okay, you can do an open loop for the second one. O, and then for this one, you can do an open O. You can do an O where you keep the first O a little bit open. So you start off at the 1 o'clock mark, and then you're going to go right under there. Keep that under, and then come out. And then you can do a regular oval O here. For F, there was a question about the letter F. Okay, actually, if you guys are on Instagram, so one of the students, I think it was Chenny, she asked about how to flourish Hufflepuff. So I actually sketched that out the other day, just yesterday actually was when I was playing around with it, because look at how many ascending and descending letters there were. So if you guys do want to join in on the Instagram challenge that I just spontaneously was just sharing with people, just to have fun this week, if they want to try their own version of this word, Hufflepuff, then that would be quite a challenge. So, yeah, please share and let me know, what you guys, how you guys would play around with that word. So anyway, so there was a question about F. So let me see if I can show a couple of variations for if you have two Fs. So this is the basic F. Okay, you have just a loop and then your full pressure stroke. Usually you have a comma dot here and an extra stroke. Okay, so if you have two Fs, you can do one, straight down, can go here. You can actually do a flick, do a nice curve, down slant, and then loop around, and make sure you can intersect that as well. your shade would be down here. You can add a straight line across, or you can actually curve that and do a crossbar of the F with a slight wave. You can start with the flick, this F, and keep it an open loop at the bottom. And this one too, you can do either a wave or a straight line. Okay, and then I did an exit stroke, and then you can add a loop here, and then bring it in towards the letter, add a little loop, and then bring it out. Okay, so those are just some ones that come to mind for this. So even with these, I do want to give you guys like another resource page for this as well. So you know what? I'm going to just combine maybe a sheet of entry flourishes examples as well as double letters that you can just print out and just take a look at. For letters like T, somebody was asking for T. There's not really much variation for T because the letter T, I know some people try to, let me move this down actually, try to add a loop for the T, but if you do too big of a loop, it's going to look like an L. And so again, legibility always comes before design. And so I recommend not changing the letter T. The T should always be a full pressure stroke. I know for modern calligraphy, they'll do like a small loop like this. And then they'll do a crossbar. Okay, and that's okay. But I just feel like if some people, if they do like a bigger loop like this, that looks more like an L to me than a T. And so I would just recommend just sticking with the straight. But if you're looking for maybe just trying to change up two T's, another way you can do that. Here's the T. I would stop it here, and then you can actually exit off of it with a more straight line up. Okay, so let's see. If I were to do, and then you can just do a nice curve flourish across both. So let me just do an example. Let's say like butter. If I have the word butter, let's see. B U T T E okay. And this you can actually connect. Do the crossbar off of that B to cross the T. Okay, so this is the only variation that I personally would use. So I would just add a little bit of a edgy exit stroke for that T. Because I wouldn't recommend adding a loop to the T only because it can look like the letter L. Okay, so that was T, and then G. Okay, so if you have, let's say, a lot of space to the left and to the right, but you have a G and a Y next to each other. Okay, so let's say you have this, and then you have Y. Okay, but let's say you have a lot of space to the right and to the left. Okay, so then an example that I did share on my Instagram was that then I would just focus on how to add a loop on this side. And then if you wanted to add a flourish off of this G, because you have a lot of space, let's say on the left of that G, actually I'm going to use my favorite G, which is make a circle, come back up, and you can do a line, do a spiral, and then intersect it, but you can just stop it right there. Only because, oh, and then if that's the case, instead of connecting it from the baseline for the Y, sometimes I like to actually enter the Y with a slight curve from the top here. Do a slight compound curve. And then this part here too, I like to add a slight curve here. Okay, so this is just another example. If you have letters like G and a Y next to each other, I personally wouldn't like put this all the way down through, only because I guess it's not too bad, but I just don't want all of my lines to look really messy. But this one actually is not too bad if you have a lot of flourishes on top. It really depends on the overall balance of the word. So usually when I'm looking at a word, the flourish that I decide to choose really depends on what kind of other flourishes are happening within that. So let me actually show you an example for this one. I was working on this too right before I logged on here. Somebody was asking about how to flourish Egyptian because there's a lot of ascending and descending options here as well. And so I first put down the E and then the G. This is the same one that I did with this one. Right, I stopped right here. And then with the Y, because there's nothing else bottom here except that P. But with that P, I just kept it straight because it kept it clean. And then I added a loop. And then because there was so much space on this bottom part, while I ended it here, I realized that there's still a lot of space down here. So I just added another loop. And then I brought it back up and I intersected it with that N, which is, again, totally okay because as long as these are all hairlines, they can still look very delicate and graceful. Okay, so even with this P, I decided to open up that loop for the P, use it as a crossbar for the T, and then loop it around. You could actually bring this loop up this way, but because all of these are up, going back up, I decided to just bring this loop down towards kind of like hugging the word for this word. I'm just because of time, just going to show you this one as well. Someone was asking about how to flourish if I have two L's next to each other. Okay, so usually you can do both the same, but if you wanted to add a little bit of a different variation for one of the L's, an L that I like to do is this one, where one of them I would go above the second one. I come back around. You can end it right here, or you can actually bring it all the way across and kind of make another second loop for that L. Okay, so these sheets I will scan, and then I will have it available as well under the live session links. Can't believe it's already 12:30, but let me see. While I'm looking through the rest of the sheets I have in front of me, do you guys have any questions for me? Those of you that are here live, I did want to, I do have one more thing I wanted to kind of go over with you guys, but for anyone that's tuning in live, I did want to open up for any questions. If you guys had any questions for me. Okay. One thing I did want to point out to you guys, a question that came in was regarding examples of words flourishing off of letters without descending and ascending stem line. And this is something that we talked about before. I personally, I know it's going to be that you guys probably call it like the flourishing bug and you want to flourish like everything, which is so awesome to see. But like usually when you have a word, playing around with the entry flourishes, the end flourishes, descending stem loops is enough. Ascending stem loops will be enough to cover the white space and around your word. And so a question came in like for this word here, you know, she tried to flourish off of this O and then intersect it with this E. And for me, this whole word, it's not too bad. You know, it's not like this flourish affects the legibility of that letter, but I personally don't feel like I need to flourish off letters without ascending, descending loops unless there is absolutely no other flourishes that we can do for the end or beginning or descending, ascending. Only when there's like I've really maxed out all possibilities, then I would, you know, let's say, for example, like with the S, then I'll bring the S down below the baseline. Or we talked about the K, how you can bring the K under the baseline. But if for this word over here, if I just kept this connecting to this O, and not have it flourish up this way, because when you flourish off of here and then you try to connect with another lowercase letter, it kind of, the flourish is, it can actually disconnect the whole word as a whole. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but so I would, if we were to just connect it to the U, and let's say she wanted to fill up the space, and this is why she added that flourish, you have to ask yourself, like, why do you even need a flourish there? And so if the purpose of this O flourish was to fill up this space here, before I do the O flourish, I would actually revisit my ending flourish to see if there's any other flourish I can use to cover this gap. Okay, because if the purpose of this flourish is this space here, then there's definitely other variations for this end flourish that we can use to cover this flourish up on top. So again, so if we were to play around with this E at the end, this flourish is really nice for just covering this part of about 3 letters for this word. But if you wanted to bring that flourish here, then then I would personally use the flourish where, let me get my pencil. Again, go beneath the baseline, come back up, and then you can do your reverse, add a shade, and then add a loop, and come back in. I don't know if you can see, let me do that with the red pen. Okay, so with this E, instead of that flourish here, I'm going to actually bring it up above the waistline and then give a nice big oval shape. And this, as you can see, it covers, maybe I should use a marker. It's hard to see. Okay, so with, is this better? Yeah, I think this one might be a little better. Okay, I will then close up that white space with this ending flourish off of this E, okay? Instead of going off of this O. So does that make sense? So before you guys try to flourish off of letters without the ascending and descending stem loop, I would first see if there's any other possibilities with your end flourishes, beginning flourishes, ascending and descending stem loops first, because I don't want this flourish to make it look like it's disconnecting the CO from the rest of this word. And so even with this letter, word like present, you see how the flourish off of the R kind of makes this look separate from the rest of this word. And so I would actually connect this straight onto the, and again, look at the spacing here too. Notice that because the flourish was added here, it moved the E over. But then the flourishing for the rest of this word, it looks like the spacing here is a little bit bigger than the rest here. And so that's another thing. That's another reason why I wouldn't flourish off of letters to fill up this, just, to break up that rhythm. Okay, so if I were to go from this example here, I love that she used this P flourish here because it kind of covered up this space here. We have the T, which is great. She added one more loop down here, and then she uses crossbar to do this end flourish. So if the purpose of this R flourish is to cover the space, then you want to think like, what flourish can I use from the other letters that can naturally fill up the space rather than trying to add a flourish off of this letter? And for me, the first thing comes to mind would be the P. Okay, so if you notice with the P is a great place for you to add a ascending stem flourish on top. Okay, so again, she had this beginning really short on top, but I would just extend that on top above the waistline. You can end it here, or you can bring it across here, but then I did it on this example because I have this crossbar for the T and I don't want it to make it look too crazy on top. Okay, so I hope that kind of explains a little bit better. And then with this entry stroke, because I have a lot of going on here, I would probably do a more horizontal oval entry flourish for that word to give a little bit of a balance. Because you have such a big flourish on the right side, I added a little bit of a oval shape on the left side to balance that out. So that was one thing I did want to address for you guys when it comes to flourishing off of letters that don't contain a descending or ascending stem loop. Okay, so I'm a little bit over time. It's 12:40, but let me see. Just want to make sure I have. Okay. So I'm going to just actually I'm just going to close. If there's no other questions, I'm just going to close by inking one word that I know for the module 2, there was a part where I was sharing about, flourishing off of letters without the ascending or descending stem loop. And one of the examples I was talking about was for a word like Paris. Okay, let me zoom out to make sure I get it all in there. Okay. So just wanted to close by actually inking one of those words. Okay, so, but yeah, if you guys have any other questions, just feel free to ask here while I write this, and then when I close, I'll be able to. Okay, so I'm using Hunt 22. I'm using Beetlejuice ink, and this is the copper plate graph pad from John Neal. Okay, so Paris. Okay. Okay, then I'm going to do this top of this P. Oh, actually, sorry. Let me do that again because usually I don't do the flourish right away. I actually put down the body of the P first. Sorry, guys. Okay. Let's try that again. Okay, so I'm gonna put down the P first. Loop it in and do my oval. Here's your P. Okay. And then with the R, remember we brought it below the baseline. This one's a little bit more angled than I would like, but then you can connect it with the I. And then we're going to finish this S. Bring this over. I'm going to finish off with this top part of this P. Then we're going to add that entry stroke, that loop that we talked about. I'm going to go bottom and then add a loop. Okay. So this R, I don't like it, but but it's okay. You guys can see that I don't always get it right just all the time. The first time, I would probably want to bring this down lower and make it more of a curve. Nice curve to that R. Okay, someone just wanted to see this one of these examples inked. So that's just why I wanted to just show that part. Okay, so I hope this live session was helpful. Oh, my hair is so crazy. But thank you guys for tuning in. It was like an hour and 15 minutes, and I do try to stay within the 1 hour, but this module, I just had so many questions and I wanted to make sure I answered and addressed everything. So all of these sheets, at some point this week, I will scan it and then I'm going to put it up in the live session links. And so in the student forum, you should see there is a section called live session links. And then so I'll do the replay link as well as just a link for download for all of these examples that we talked about. And then hopefully before the course ends or sometime like soon, I will work on that resource page for you guys for the entry flourishes as well as the double letters and just some examples that you guys can have as a resource. So thank you guys for tuning in. Eunice, Bernice, Laura, Lissa, and I hope you guys are enjoying Module 3 for uppercase letters, and make sure to submit any questions, and I will probably do one of these again, hopefully during the weekend, to just kind of tackle uppercase letters and questions together for that. So, okay, so I think we're done here, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. Okay, bye guys.